Video games can offer a wide range of emotions. Some could be positive, some could be negative, and some could be, "You call this shit art?" But despite the fact that some games are quite capable of making you laugh and cry, some games could even bring out a sense of fear in you, which is exactly why horror games will not be mentioned on this channel.
Gotta stand out with something.
However, there are games out there that aren't part of the horror game genre, but can still spook you to some extent, whether it's mysterious entities that lurk around the surrounding areas, urban legends, or the topic of today's video, the location itself. And while it's essentially a standard for all games like platformers, let's say, to have a spooky themed location in there, even if the game itself isn't even meant to be all that scary to begin with, some games that aren't part of the horror genre, like Nintendo, let's say, still go out of their way to offer a plethora of spooky themed location in their games, where some could actually be pretty scary. It wouldn't have to be something that scares you per se, but something where you just ultimately get the vibe that you're in danger, or a strong atmosphere that makes the location look much scarier than it actually is.
And that's what I wanted to discuss for today. The spookiest locations in Nintendo games that don't exactly have to be scary per se, but are probably some of the scariest amongst Nintendo games. So now let's go through a good chunk of Nintendo's games and find the scariest games locations there are.
So starting things off, here we have a location from a more recent but not too recent Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and the location is the underground caverns of Hyrule Castle. Now, you'll be exploring the underground depths of Hyrule a lot throughout this game, but that's only after you're done enduring this area before you can do all that. For a tutorial section in a pretty recent Nintendo game, no less, this place is actually quite sinister. The caves are dark and ominous, the music is bone-chilling where it gets even more intense the farther you progress, and the caves even hold something, or someone I should say, that's quite creepy in his own right in the form of Ganondorf, who's became mummified after being imprisoned for thousands of years. And that already makes this place quite creepy in its own right, but when you're, spoiler alert, exploring this area towards the end of the game, it's even scarier because there's now other monsters that inhabit the place that will stop at nothing to kill you, and the music gets even more intense than in the tutorial section. So in case you're wondering, this place definitely fits the bill for being a pretty spooky location in a Nintendo game. Now this next one is from a Mario game, or spin-off I should say, being Luigi's Mansion. And that's exactly it, the mansion. I already talked about Luigi's Mansion before, so I won't waste too much time talking about it here, but I just wanted to bring up the mansion itself because this place is definitely quite spooky, with almost all the elements here that make up a horror game that's still E-rated enough to be a Mario spin-off. You're also given the feeling that danger is imminent, like from the ghosts that inhabit the place, really setting in the loneliness as if you're in more danger now that you're alone. Add in the fact that this mansion feels lived in its own right visually, and the atmosphere being the darkest scene in any Mario game even 23 years later, and you have a recipe for one of the spookiest locations in Nintendo games, which is good because I've been trying to figure out this piece of shit for the past 2 years. Now with Metroid, it's basically a shoo-in to feature at least one location from one of its games, and that's why I'm going with Planet Zebes from Super Metroid. Really, I could have went with anything from the Metroid games, but I chose Zebes because of how dark and atmospheric it is. It's dark when you arrive, you hear nothing but the sound of your own footsteps when you move around, and when there is music, it's dark and foreboding. There's even monsters lurking around. Sure, there's probably more spookier locations in the Metroid series than this, but really this one's a bit of an oldie and honestly quite iconic, so it fits. Now I know what you're thinking. You can't possibly get any spookier than Metroid, and if that's what you were thinking, you'd be right. But what if I threw you a curveball and asked, does Super Metroid have a sentient piano that tries to kill you? If so, then that only proves my point even more. So as you can tell, we're going with another Mario location today, being Big Boo's Haunt from Super Mario 64. And between this and the other Mario-related contender from earlier, this destination is a true testament to how, despite the fact that the Mario series is a game all about exploring bright and colorful locales, the franchise isn't afraid to take things for a dark turn every so often. And this area shows. Although it's not necessarily as creepy as the mansion that Luigi was exploring was, it's still relatively up there. In terms of music and the sounds of heavy wind blowing, visually it's somewhat dark, but the sounds definitely enhance the spookiness factor more than the looks though. However, the room in that level where you encounter the mad piano is the creepy part visually. You go into this room to collect one of the 8 red coins that are scattered about to get the star, and in one of the rooms you find a piano that doesn't really look like anything suspicious, just a basic piano lying around, nothing going on here. But when you get closer to it, it suddenly comes to life and is a ferocious beast that will eat you alive.
Oh, that's why I was never a music kid.
Yeah, so this is kind of unsettling. I mean, to be honest, I was never really scared of the mad piano anytime I played this level. But look at this thing. It's designed with those teeth, its ferocious dog sounds. Is this something you would want to see in music class?
No.
The next and actually last location I want to discuss is Twilight Town from Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door. Because look at this place. Look how dark and dreary it is. Listen to the music. Explore the castle. Why wouldn't this place creep you out? Now, Twilight Town isn't exactly scary per se, but I think when it comes to pure atmosphere, it almost rivals Luigi's Mansion in that sense.
I said almost.
And honestly, the fear really only comes from the aesthetic themselves. I really just found the actual antagonist and NPCs in this chapter to just be your no-frills Mario goons. But if you can craft an actual spooky location that can be creepy just for the looks alone, then that speaks volumes to the artist involved. But I'm specifically looking at the original GameCube version. The remake still is that, but it's a lot brighter and felt that it did lose a bit of the genuine fear that came from the visuals compared to the original. The remake still retains the spookiness of the visuals and does look better overall, but I just think the original GameCube version of Twilight Town is better, honestly.
And those are just a couple of the spookiest locations in Nintendo games in my opinion. And I know I didn't go through much, but I went with at the very least ones that could be agreed upon by a large group of people. And it also proves that games don't need to be a part of the horror genre to be scary. And speaking of horror games, it's a good thing I didn't bring those up as well because I'm too tired to be scared.
And that's gonna wrap up today's video. If you enjoyed the video, then please consider subscribing and checking out my other videos on my channel where you'll find more videos like this one. Thank you for watching and I will see you in the next video.